This is Marc Mullinax. Welcome back, my friends, to this show that's about to end. 5 more verses. Today, verse 77, a meditation on how balanced things become unbalanced. Verse 76 began this theme, and because Tao Te Ching was originally one long, undivided poem, one not divided into 81 smaller verses, sometimes themes cluster together in adjacent verses throughout the text. One example of this, you may remember, occurred in verses 63 and 64's double emphasis on beginnings. Now, with 77's stunning visual image of an act of balancing a bow, as in bow and arrow, that when stretched by the archer perfectly bends equally at the top and the bottom, we continue with how heaven is balanced. And because we are connected with Tao, we can, through this image, consider how we ourselves are balanced. Balance has many applications in verse 77, and since one of them includes how Tao balance applies to societal and class makeup, I'm entitling this class today, The Tao of Robin Hood.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
3 quotes by Chinese philosophers start this podcast today. Cao Hung. In attaching a string to a bow, we pull the bow down to attach the string to the top. We lift the bow up to attach it to the bottom. If the string is too long, we make it shorter. If the string is too short, we make it longer. This is exactly the way of heaven. Ho Shang Kung. The way of heaven is so dark we need metaphors to understand it. To prepare a bow for use, we string it by pulling down the top and lifting up the bottom. Likewise, the way of heaven takes from the strong and gives to the weak. Finally, Wang Pang. The way of heaven is based on the natural order, hence, it is fair. The way of humanity is based on desire, hence, it is not fair. Those who possess the way follow the same way as heaven. Class, is it always the case that the rich get richer and the poor become poorer? Can it ever be the reality that there are equal shares for all? But which is worse, the rich not being as rich or the poor not being so poor? Where's the balance? As long as humanity is in charge of distribution of resources and equality and equity, there will be lower and upper classes, hierarchies, inequalities that society will justify fully as somehow, quote, necessary. So Tao Te Ching today is a political and economic shot across the bow of our usual ways of dividing resources across society. As one portion of D.C. Lao's translation of verse 77 plainly says, it is the way of heaven to take from what has in excess in order to make good what is deficient. Here's my translation of the entire verse 77, original balance. Is not heaven's Tao comparable to flexing a stringed bow? When one draws the bowstring bends the top knock or portion down in sync with it lifting the bottom knock or portion up. Nothing too tense, nothing too loose. Likewise, Tao's ever-adjusting and impartial style subtracts from privilege and adds to privation. But human beings, when forgetful of Tao, practice another Tao. Empty out the poor to top off the tanks of the rich. Who can integrate heaven's abundance into the world? Only those living Tao's abundance. So the sage performs her works without the prejudice that ownership triggers. Watch how, without promotion or publicity, how our excellence is in play. All right, folks, I'm coming out. Ready? I am a Marxist. Nah, not a Marxist in terms of wanting a Marxist or Marxism to direct a government and bully a society. Instead, I use Marxism as a tool of social analysis. The shortest way to explain this is to ask you to remember back to the biblical story of the Good Samaritan, a Jesus story in which a person is robbed on a lonely road to Jericho, left for dead, and the only helper willing to attend to him is this guy from Samaria. The question a Marxist would ask of this story is not one addressed by Jesus. It's this: well, it's wonderful that one guy helps another guy on the road to Jericho. Why, oh, why is a Jericho road dangerous in the first place? What is it about the road that lends itself to crime? It's an unpopular question, this. What is it about the very material conditions of a road, or a region, or a city, or even a nation that makes it an unbalanced place? Is a power question, and most of us are not trained nor accustomed to asking power questions. It's a power question to ask why 100-year floods are now happening every few years. It takes a courageous, critical thinking that questions the very foundations of our belief. But without critical thinking, we too often apply little tiny band-aids on huge systemic problems and then call them solved. We don't like to interrogate the lengths that power will go to retain its own power, its invisibility, its mystification, its gaslighting, and other shell games. Ego-driven power only wants to retain and reinforce inequalities with opaque or invisible power structures. And we like to focus on individual behaviors, like we are self-made people. But the analysis needed is the analysis of larger systems and their inherent, often secret power. Like the poor are poor because they're lazy. Rarely do we privileged folk like to show that we are not the self-made people that we would have people believe. We are just lucky as hell. Yeah, we may have worked hard to get where we are in life, but the power-critical thinking question interrogates all privilege. In reality, maybe you, are just downright lucky to have been born in the right century, in the right zip code, in the right nation, with the right gender, and the right skin color. It's luck. 100% luck. The only question now is, how will I play my cards? How will I use the time left to me? Will I maintain the imbalances or seek to interrupt them? This is not just a Marxist query, but also a Taoist wisdom investigation. Verse 77 claims Tao and Tao's heaven speaks to a real-time correspondence between the haves and the have-nots. When you draw back the arrow in the bow, heaven decrees that the two ends of the bow bend in tandem, not just at one end. Equality, balance. Anything else is artificial, temporary, even morally wrong, a dead end. We humans are quite skilled in pretending only the top of the bow or the top of society needs to bend or gets to bend. Bend and get richer, goes the thinking. Seems like it's a victimless crime. If we could learn about the naked power of systems, we would do well to draw back our camera and see the truth of two quotes here, the first by Herman Melville and the second by Thich Naht Hanh. Melville: we cannot live only for ourselves. 1,000 fibers connect us with our fellow human beings, and among those fibers, as sympathetic threads, our actions run as causes, and they come back to us as effects. Thich Naht Hanh: about 30 years ago, I was looking for an English word to describe our deep interconnection with everything else. I liked the word togetherness, but I finally came up with the word interbeing. The verb to be can be misleading because we cannot be by ourselves alone. To be is always to interbe. If we combine the prefix inter, I-N-T-E-R, with the verb to be, we have a new verb, interbe. To interbe and the action of interbeing reflects reality more accurately. We inter-are with one another and with all life. Thich Nhat Hanh continues, there's a biologist named Lewis Thomas whose work I appreciate very much. He describes how our human bodies are, quote, shared, rented, and occupied, unquote, by countless other tiny organisms, without whom we couldn't move a muscle, drum a finger, or think a thought. Our body is a community, and the trillions of non-human cells in our body are even more numerous than the human cells. But without them, we could not be here in this moment. Without them, we would not be able to think, to feel, even to speak. There are, he says, no solitary beings. The whole planet is one giant, living, breathing cell with all its parts working and linked in symbiosis. So, if Lewis Thomas is correct, there is no solitary self-made person or persons. Our interbeing connections are too dense for a simple answer about how someone becomes a billionaire, for example. We live in circles of mutual accountability. However, we want to see only straight and obvious lines of causation. If there are no solitary beings, then how long can we pretend that some beings are better than other beings, more desirable or less desirable? A hierarchy is a fiction we've made into our sorry reality. The really real and true reality, we are, both within and without, a true collective puzzle of interlocking parts and roles played by beings of which we are rarely aware. So please tell me, how can just one class of people in the body politic think you can move the top of the bow or upper crust of society without the bottom of the bow society also moving in sync? Money seems to divide us, yeah? But really? If the top is rich and the bottom does not share in that wealth, there is unbalance, no matter how you slice it. And if I read this verse correctly, Tao's yin-yang seeks balance all the time. It may seem that Tao is on the side of the deprived, but Tao is just not making any preferences. Tao's only job description from creation onward is balance. It's not just a matter of nature, but the nature of matter to be balanced. Tao's ever-adjusting and impartial style subtracts from privilege and adds to privation. Nothing too tense, nothing too loose. This teaching about our radical interconnectedness is often heard in spiritual circles today. But I wonder, does it sink down to our cellular level? Because we act or pretend as if simple cause and effect is at work. We push hard to find one simple reason things have gone right or wrong. We look for the one action, the one person that created our situations. Like, my parents beat me when I was a little boy. Too simple. As soon as we find one person or one action as the cause, we retire from solving what seems to be a solved problem. This has to be so tiring to engage all the time in useless problem-solving habits, but have nothing change because we're not asking the right critical questions. So consider the Buddha's words. All things appear and disappear because of the concurrence of causes and conditions. Nothing ever exists entirely alone. Everything is in relation to everything else.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
Our verse today invites us to understand invisible things, like the ways in which things tend to get out of balance when we exchange, quote, another Tao, unquote, for Tao itself. To address how to reestablish balance, we should return to the theme of how heaven works, which is ever and always in non-preferential, non-meddling, wu-wei ways. The reason things are the way they are is because we allow those with influence quietly to grow their interests beyond sustainable levels. They're meddling in laws with decrees, tax policies tilted towards the rich, building zones and zoning zones, all shoring up a worldwide culture in which the better part of this world's abundance concentrates in the already rich. Let me emphasize the next thought. Our task is to return to non-meddling. It's our task, not just that of leaders. Leadership is everyone's duty in Tao's logic. Here are 4 witnesses to this truth, 4 short sentences by, respectively, Stanislaw Jersey Lee, then Douglas Adams, then Pete Seeger, and finally Abraham Joshua Heschel. First, no snowflake in an avalanche ever feels responsible. Second, the single raindrop never feels responsible for the flood. Third, drops of water turn a mill. Singly none, singly none. Finally, few are guilty, but all are responsible. From Tao's wisdom, the balance taught in this verse is the law of yin and yang. When something is excessive, it becomes naturally reduced. When something or someone is insufficient, it gets supplemented. Depending upon whether one is at the top of the bow or society or the bottom, here is implied a natural reversal of fortunes. Bluntly put, the Tao of heaven takes just enough from those with too much and gives, again, just enough to those who do not have enough. Tao reduces whatever is excessive and supplements whatever is insufficient. Tao would put the spotlight of its justice on the Jericho road, dear Jesus, and by its very searing scale of justice, the Jericho road, starting just by being in the spotlight of the news, becomes a less dangerous place. The human way, or the human Tao, small case t, forgetting the heavenly way, turns out different. We take from those who do not have enough to give to those who have too much already. We reduce the already insufficient in order to offer more to those with excess. Makes no sense. Verse 8 reminds us, fill a space with too much gold or jade, and who can guard it? Overwork yourself with honor, status, or pride, and how do you avoid ruin? Too much of anything leads straight to meddling chaos. Early retirement is heaven's nature. So nature's balance, heaven's balance, Tao's balance is the fundamental nature of balance itself, removing from a surplus to provide for the scarce. The Taoist Chuang-Tzu frames it like this. It is the way of heaven to keep moving and to allow no piling up. Hence the 10,000 things come to completion. It is the way of the emperor to keep moving and to allow no piling up. Hence the whole world repairs to his court. It is the way of the sage to keep moving and to allow no piling up. Hence all within the seas bow to the sage. The one who has a clear understanding of the virtue of heaven and earth, that person harmonizes with heaven, and by doing so, they bring equitable accord to the world and harmonizes with all persons. To harmonize with all persons, it's called human joy. To harmonize with heaven, it's called heavenly joy. How does all this happen? Asked Chuang-Tzu. Yin and yang in balance. To underline this teaching, let's return to how Tao works, explained in verse 73. Who has ever discerned the reason for heaven's inscrutable fates? Explanations tongue-tie even the sage. For heaven's Tao overcomes without being pushy, responds without breaking silence, arrives, sleeves rolled up without a summons. Unhurried, it shows itself at the right time. Nothing sneaks through when heaven casts its coarsely woven net. Sun Tzu's, The Art of War, his thinking fits in here. Nature, he said, operates with constant regularity. It does not exist for the sake of one, nor does it cease to exist because of the other. Respond to it with peace and order, and good fortune will result. Respond to it with disorder, and disaster will follow. If the foundations for living are strengthened and are economically used, then nature cannot bring impoverishment. If people's nourishment is sufficient and their labor in keeping with the seasons, then nature cannot inflict sickness. If the way is cultivated without deviation, then nature cannot cause misfortune. And I love this. Nature cannot, not just does not, it cannot inflict impoverishment, sickness, or misfortune. Therefore, verse 77 emphasizes the natural, quiet, behind the scenes of Tao's moral law. which we first encounter as an impartiality of nature. Nature has no ultimate purpose, or in philosophical terms, no teleology, no end game, no omega point to which it's pointing. It's the journey that is Tao's concern. Natural phenomena operate according to consistent patterns and are not governed by any specific individual will or purpose. The Rolling Stones sing, "You can't always get what you want." No, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. Oh, Mick Jagger, very, very Tao. To get even more philosophical, the Scottish philosopher David Hume said famously in the 1700s, "The laws of nature are simply regularities of events. But we humans want these regularities to become predictable patterns. But predictability is a figment of the human mind, which loves, above all, predictability." Translated from his 1700 Scotland to our 2000s Western society, Hume and Tao agreed that the only balance in nature is seen in its regularity of yin forces and yang forces, a force that includes the entire universe, not just a measly green planet orbiting our second-class star in our far corner of the universe. The bow of heaven is huge, and where it bends down in one place, its other end bends in another. What we call causation is mere uncritical, wishful thinking.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
So, how do we apply this rule that seems so difficult to analyze? Can we make verse 77 into some decoder ring for the universe at large? How may we live wisely in this mysterious yin and yang universe? 2 historical examples. First, St. Nicholas was a 4th century Christian saint from Turkey, known for his often anonymous acts of charity for the poor. At Christmas time, he would leave riches on the doorsteps of the poor, ring the bell or knock on the door, and then flee. Now, in his Western garb, we've downgraded this story, St. Nicholas, into a Santa Claus, interested only in who's naughty and who's nice. Please. Second, take Robin Hood, a legendary outlaw hero of a series of English ballads dating from at least as early as the 14th century. A rebel? Many of the most striking episodes in the tales of Robin Hood show him and his companions robbing and killing representatives of authority and giving the gains to the poor. Both the historical St. Nicholas and the non-historical Robin Hood embody a mysterious algorithm of Tao. Nothing too tense, nothing too loose. Tao's ever-adjusting and impartial style subtracts from privilege and adds to privation. But we human beings, when forgetful of Tao, practice another Tao. Empty out the poor to top off the tanks of the rich. Who can integrate heaven's abundance into the world? Only those living Tao's abundance. We apply verse 77 by living like verse 77's bow, by learning when to release tension where there is excess and when to offer support where there's a slack or lack. In ourselves, in our homes, in our workplaces, in how we speak and how we give, we can practice balance. Tao is not asking any grand revolutions of us, some Marxist wet dream of a classless society. Tao would have us seek only for small harmonizations, tiny acts of restoration, like noticing imbalance and gently shifting our weight to restore steadiness, like someone adjusting to a backpack so that both shoulders can carry the load. Only we adjust the loads carried by the rich and the poor. And again, what is walking? But always leaning forward, but maintaining your balance. Left, right, left, right. Pull the bow back, release the bow. Practicing verse 77 includes the disciplines of close listening, of compassion, and of carrying others too heavy loads. So how do you do it? Start close in. Maybe We share credit for something that we get to do, because in reality, there were hundreds of events prior to it, and we just capitalized or brought something into being that wasn't there before, but we stand on other people's shoulders. Maybe it's how we give time to someone ignored. Maybe it's how we step back so another voice can rise. Maybe it's how we question the convenient life we become adjusted to, because someone, somewhere, is paying the price of it. You know the butterfly effect. It has so many dimensions. Ask yourself, where am I overfull? Where can I empty? Where is someone undernourished spiritually, materially, emotionally? And how might I contribute without meddling, but only with compassionate care? The sage of Tao never advertises her goodness. She just quietly lives it, quietly, like compost decomposing, like breath in and out without our notice, like rain. So don't rush to fix everything. Just move towards balance, as the Tao does, slowly, imperceptibly, unhurriedly, unforced, one moment at a time, a single redistribution at a time, one act of quiet generosity at a time. Good luck, my fellow Robin Hoods. Finally, today's family-friendly rendering of verse 77, called Balancing Like a Bow. Heaven's way is like drawing an archery bow. Pulling the top down is the same action that lifts the bottom up. Nothing too tight, nothing too loose. Tao likewise is always and ever adjusting, giving to those in need and taking from those with too much. People forget this and often do the opposite. The world is already balanced, already full of abundance. Let's share the balance and abundance instead of hoarding. Abundance is Tao's law, not scarcity. Wise people work without showing off or claiming credit, just like animals do. Their generosity just happens naturally. Balance follows the path of the big-hearted. You've been listening to a podcast that has been free ever since the beginning and remains free. And I hope it's freeing. It's our way of following the balance of the universe. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, visual artist Audrey Davis, music artist Molly Hartwell. We acknowledge that all quotes from my Tao Te Ching translation are held in copyright by Fortress Press. May your days begin in peace and become spontaneous places to cultivate your inner Robin Hood.
When you're listening, are you listening?